Hey guys. All right. So Jesse just attempted using a phone for the first time, and it really had me giggling personally because I'm like, how would any of you seventh graders use a payphone? Would you have a clue how to use a payphone? I have to giggle because I don't know that many of you have ever seen one, except maybe in an antique store at this point. So, so anyway, she just tried to use a payphone. Didn't get an answer. She did use it correctly, didn't get an answer. So let's see if she does get a hold of him in chapter 15 here on page 106. Yeah, 106. Okay. Jessie stood next to the phone, trying to decide how long she should wait before dialing Mr. Neely's number again. And then she felt the bump from behind. She half turned and saw a man slipping. His limbs jolted outward. His left arm brushed the note from Ma and knocked it to the ground. The force of his fall brought Jessie down too. "Oh, excuse me," the man said. "You aren't hurt, are you? I'm so clumsy. Looks like I haven't broken in this new pair of feet yet." Jessie scrambled to her feet and looked at the man suspiciously. His fall reminded her of the way Chester Seward and Richard Dunlap sometimes acted during recess at school, knocking down girls by accident so they could look up the girls' skirts. But this man was an adult, and Jessie was wearing pants like a boy. The man picked up Ma's note and looked at it. No! Jessie wanted to scream. But if the man was from Clifton, should she run? But she couldn't get help without Ma's note. "Ah, this must be yours," the man said casually, holding the scrap of paper to Jessie. "I am so sorry. Are you done with the phone? That was really why I walked over here, not to put you in traction. You're all right, aren't you?" Yeah, Jessie stammered, clutching her note. The man turned away, took out a notebook from his jacket, and seemed to be writing something down. Then he picked up the phone. Jessie backed away from the man, her thoughts jumbled. This man couldn't be from Clifton because he would have captured her right there, wouldn't he? But why had he knocked her down? Why had he looked at her note? What had he written? Jessie wanted to believe the man had nothing to do with her or Clifton, but still, she just couldn't shake her fear. Blindly, she turned and ran. Risking one glance over her shoulder, Jessie saw that the man was still talking on the phone, and so she kept on. The man had acted so strangely and was dressed so strangely. He wore a blue shirt with an odd strip of flowered cloth hanging down from his neck. But everyone seemed odd to Jessie outside Clifton. Panting, Jessie slowed down. She couldn't run forever, and she had to keep looking for a phone. Now that she knew they had blue signs above them, she would surely find another one soon, and then she'd get help from Katie and the others. For Katie and the others. And she wouldn't have to worry anymore about whether the strange people she saw were or were not on Miles Clifton's side. But Jessie walked miles without seeing another one of the blue phone signs. She wondered if she should have stayed by the phone at the stopping point in spite of that strange man. She worried about the puzzle even Ma didn't understand. Why did anyone want the children of Clifton to die of diphtheria? Diphtheria. Mrs. Spurning, the guide for the tourists back at Clifton, had said Clifton residents got modern medical care, so the tourists must not care if Clifton was totally authentic. How could anyone want Katie, sweet little Katie, to die? Or Betsy Benton, or any of the Clifton children? Jessie blinked back tears and walked faster. She had to find a phone. When she got hungry again, she didn't stop, but pulled a hunk of bread out of her pack and ate while she walked. She paused only for a moment to gulp down the last of the papaya juice. It left a too sweet taste in her mouth. She longed for ordinary water, but the fat environmentalist's warning about poison water made her leery of drinking from any of the streams she crossed. Anyhow, there wasn't time to stop. Jessie passed woods almost as dense as those around Clifton and felt slightly better because that meant the Clifton woods weren't the last in the world. After a few miles, though, the landscape flattened out and there were no more trees or hills to remind her of home. Except for the ditches on each side of the big road, the land was almost perfectly level. Long fences marked off enormous fields. Jessie recognized small corn plants growing in even rows in one of the fields, and she marveled at the farmer who could plant so much. Mr. Atkins, who had the biggest fields in Clifton, only planted 20 rows of corn each spring, and he bragged about it. This field had hundreds, and then there was another field just like it. People must work really hard out here, Jessie thought. She hated hoeing just the little field that Pa kept. Jessie's legs felt rubbery, just like they did after a long day of hoeing corn. She was sure she'd been walking for hours. The sun was sinking low in the sky now. In Clifton, school would have been out long ago, and all the children in the village would be doing their chores. Jessie wondered if Hannah had to do Jessie's and Katie's chores as well as her own. I bet she was complaining. Jessie grinned at the thought of Hannah having to do everything, but Hannah wouldn't be any good helping Ma on her sick rounds. Hannah didn't even like to hear someone sneeze. Ma would probably run herself ragged tonight trying to help all the sick children, but from what Ma had said, she couldn't do much, and she was counting on Jessie to bring the cure. Jessie looked around frantically searching for one of the blue phone signs. What if she didn't find a phone and reach Mr. Neely before dark? What if she had to walk all the way to Indianapolis? To distract herself, Jessie tried to remember everything she knew about the state's capital. Reverend Holloway had been there and sometimes talked about what a sinful place it was. It was founded on a lie, he said. When he wasn't around, though, Pa and some of the other men in Clifton laughed about how the settlers near Indianapolis had tricked the state. About 15 years ago, not long before Clifton was founded, the state decided the capital should be in the middle of Indiana, not down by the Ohio River in Corydon. So the state officials sent up scouts, and the settlers around Indianapolis told the scouts what a great place Indianapolis was, because it was easily reached on the White River. Except boats couldn't go that far up the White River. You could only get to Indianapolis by stagecoach, and everyone knew that was hard. Well, those settlers fooled the state, but now we're stuck with a capital that'll never amount to anything, Pa always said, and then the others laughed too. Jessie tried to remember what else she'd heard. It seemed there wasn't anything in Indianapolis except the legislature building and a couple others. Maybe there were more now, or maybe there were fewer. Ma hadn't said whether Indianapolis was still the capital in 1996, so Jessie kept walking. Soon she could tell from the angle of the setting sun that the road was turning more to the east. Was that a problem? Ma had said this road went all the way to Indianapolis, but that had been years ago, and maybe they had moved the road. Or Jessie rounded a curve and saw an odd set of lights hanging over the road. While she watched, a green light at the bottom went out and was replaced by a yellow light above it. Then the yellow light went out and a red light came on. The cars that had breezed by Jessie screeched to a stop before the red light. Jessie stared. Now, how did that work? There didn't seem to be anyone around to change the lights. Looking around curiously, Jessie saw a sight that made her forget the lights. Off to the left, just beyond the road, was a cluster of about 30 houses and other buildings. Jessie must have walked farther than she thought. This had to be Indianapolis. Jessie was so excited she didn't see the brown car until it was almost beside her. It was going the wrong way, backward, and a boy with greasy hair sprang out. "Get in!" he yelled at Jessie. I guess we'll find out what happens next in chapter 16.